High FM, 101.9 megahertz of life.
Let's move on to our next conversation, and that's really talking about South Africa. We had years of hope and what seemed to be everything miraculous in a positive way happening. I wanted to ask Gabriel Crouse about this. When did it go wrong? He's a writer and analyst at the Institute of Race Relations. Gabriel, good morning. Before I get started, did you have TV shows that you used to watch that you actually would prefer not to go out if those were on?
Ours, it's hard. I did. I'm trying to remember them. I mean, I should still feel young, but
of course you are. You're very, very young, Gabriel. Very, very, and obviously nobody should suggest otherwise. But what were they? Do you?
I think my favorite one, in a way, that really made me not want to go out, as nerdy as it sounds, is National Geographic.
Oh my
on a
God.
Sunday.
Really?
Maybe it's because we didn't go out on a Sunday very much anyways. But on SABC, they would show a National Geographic show every Sunday, and seeing the birds of paradise, David Attenborough whispering away. It was before the internet and before I had any sense of this guy being
who he was,
like a famous legend or anything. It was just an amazing transport into a different world.
I love that.
And I remember a couple of times telling my mom, I don't want to go. Can't I just watch the end of the episode before we go to dinner?
Wow. She probably thought, what have we raised? What is this? But I think that is incredible. You painted such an amazing memory of it. And it also shows how how Attenborough was an absolutely brilliant talent. You weren't somebody influenced by being told, this is the guy and you've got to love him. It wasn't social pressure but you just responded to his voice, the visuals and the information he was sharing. And that's real. That shows you the talent. Right, let's talk about South Africa, the early years, and when did it go wrong, do you think? Because when we ask listeners, I can tell you that 2010 was, I think, the very much it was still kind of okay then, and we were filled with hope then. Was it before that? Had it already started? Was it afterwards? Give us your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a way, the story is too big for there to be one number, for there to be one date. In some senses, I remember Dennis Beckett writing a story about a meeting of the Tripartite Alliance in 1995, I think it was, where there was some scandalous kind of thieving of T-shirts and of money for the catering. And there was this very literal, it's our turn to eat attitude on display there. And so he said, in some ways you could trace it back to that, but in some ways that'd be unfair because it was understandable that a lot of guys coming out of exile and a lot of guys who'd been in the MK kind of armed insurgency struggle mentality were readjusting to kind of a new life in a slow way, and a lot of the leadership was pretty wise and smart. And so you can have this anecdote where people are having a literal bun fight around the lunch table, and in the backstory of that, most of the money for the catering has been stolen. But on the other hand, it's okay, that's just an anecdote. What is the bigger picture? And I think the bigger picture is that in the 90s and the 2000s, South African unemployment reduced, economic growth increased. We got up to 5%. The policies were mainly wise. And I think a lot of the credit really must go to the ANC in particular for how it played a role in, through government in the South African Reserve Bank. Because the South African Reserve Bank is one of this country's most long-standingly successful institutions. And, if I can put it like this, the Nats understood that in order to succeed for as long as they can, they needed to make the mining industry work. And so what they did is, the white nationalist regime also had like a lot of mental inbreeding and a lot of corruption and a lot of stupidity. And a lot of that has been forgotten, unfortunately. But where they did focus the excellence that they could focus was on things like Eskom, so that you could have a stable power supply to furnish the mining industry with what it needed. Now, the equivalent of Eskom in the new South Africa is SARB, is the Reserve Bank, because the new South Africa is not about mining. Predominantly, it's about financial services. And SARB is to financial services sector the same as Eskom was to the mining sector. And so the ANC knew if you want to do anything else, you're going to have the financial services sector do well. And so you set up a South African Reserve Bank and you support a Reserve Bank that keeps inflation down. I mean, they inherited 15% inflation from the Nats. They brought it right down within target to 4%, and they've kept it more or less within target the whole way through. It's just jumped back up a little bit outside of target. I'm not saying they're perfect, but they really, that organization has been as good as Eskom ever was, world class. I mean, so I think that in some ways the ANC's positive legacy even still remains. There's still good things to be said about it, but it overwhelmingly became negative for the country. Government has really ended up doing more harm than good by this stage. And so I think I think the true answer is to kind of see multiple things that go wrong and cascade through the 90s, 2000s, 2010s. Up to today.
Do you think, a final question, because we do need to wrap, but do you think that part of the problem was the fact that South Africans were too tolerant of it, too understanding of saying, you know what, it's been, it's really been a horrific period during apartheid, and therefore, okay, a little bit here and a little bit there and a little bit of corruption, or maybe we didn't call it corruption, but rule flouting, etc., is okay given the past. We kind of understand it and tolerate it, and perhaps that led to almost a tacit approval of what would come later.
I think that is the case. I think there's also been some, political ineptitude. For example, if I look at COPE splintering away from the ANC, if COPE had grown or merged with the DA earlier, I think that we would have been in a better position as a country, because the Zuma turn really was an important one, and it was not instantly tolerated. Like, there was a lot of the elite institutions, universities, media houses, fully backlashed against that. But then, because it didn't arise a new sort of successful political alternative, there ended up being this like deeper toleration, and Paulism kind of came out of that. Well, let's just burn all the colonial remnants like libraries, instead of like getting to grips with the reality today, which is a totally corrupt, gangster state sort of situation. So I think tolerance and ineptitude combined with in some ways, just the last point is like an insufficiently robust non-racialism. Like, at some point, non-racialism, I think, means being okay with BE and stuff like that. And at some point, it means saying we need to phase that out. And I think too much of this soft-hearted thing you're describing, where you're like, well, because apartheid was bad, we can do anything now. But that really corrupts the mentality of like looking forward in a way that is productive and growth-oriented and meritocratic. And I think that shift has come 10, 15 years later than it should have. But the shift is happening right now, and let's see where it leads us in the next 10 years.
I think we're having conversations that we actually have never had before, and that is important. We do need to leave it there. Marco says reality hit when Zuma became president. That's very much in line with what Gabriel Crouse is saying.